What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 281 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Seaguy by Grant Morrison and Cameron Stewart. This is a 3-issue miniseries from Vertigo from the mid-2000s, like 2004 or so. And this is the story of Seaguy, that's him right there, and his pet fish, that is him right there, Chubby the Tuna, where they go on an adventure where they discover that corporate consumerism is a lot darker than what they ever had any idea that it was. And this book made me realize that Grant Morrison has different levels of weird. A lot of people who think that they're familiar with Grant Morrison, that sounded a little bit more condescending than I meant for it to be. I know people who say that Grant Morrison is too weird, too bizarre, and they can't get into what he does. And I often find myself saying I don't really understand where they're coming from. For example, his new X-Men run is pretty ordinary, pretty mundane. You have evil twins, you have Sentinels, you've got pretty much all the hallmarks of a soap operatic X-Men story. There's nothing there, in my opinion, that is so weird and so out there that you can't understand what's going on. You have All-Star Superman, where Superman is dying and he's trying to set his affairs in order. Now, some of the minutia of that story might be a little bit more out there than a normal Superman story, but overall, it's pretty easy to understand. So people who say that Grant Morrison is so weird that they can't understand him, I find myself being a little bit confused by that statement. But this book made me realize that there are actually two different kinds of weird Grant Morrison. There's the kinds where it's a relatively normal premise, for example, All-Star Superman, where Superman is dying and he has to get his affairs in order. That's a pretty normal, understandable premise. It's not like, whoa, that's crazy, that just blew my mind. What's weird about that story is all of the minutia in it. For example, Jimmy Olsen turns into Doomsday at one point. Lex Luthor's niece is apathetic and doesn't seem to care about anything. You've got all this really weird stuff in that story. It's all the small things in it that are like, oh, okay, that's really neat. And a lot of it in All-Star Superman, and I don't want this to turn into a miniature review of All-Star Superman, but a lot of the stuff in that isn't even from Grant Morrison. It's from stuff from the 1960s that Grant Morrison is a fan of. But then you have something like Seaguy, where the premise itself doesn't seem extremely weird. You've got this guy and his best friend who is a fish, and they go on an adventure where they find out what this thing called Zoo is, XOO. It's this product that is in all of the food, and they're trying to figure out what that is, and there's this mystery of the moon, where there's hieroglyphics on the moon coming down to Earth. There's all sorts of weird stuff in this story, but it's not the overall premise of the story. You look at something like Vimanorama, which I talked about a couple of days ago, I feel like the premise of that was pretty weird. You take Jack Kirby and you combine it with Hinduism, and then let's see where that takes us. The small stuff in that story wasn't what was weird, it was the overall premise of it. But you have something like Seaguy, I feel like it's a lot more like All-Star Superman, where the overall premise isn't that weird. You got a guy with a talking fish, yeah, that's a little bit weird, but it's nothing for Grant Morrison. But it's the minor stuff in this, the little things that make up this story, which is really strange and makes me go, that's a little weird. For example, there's this Viking woman here named Shebeard, and Seaguy has a big crush on her, and then at one point he's talking about how she will never go after him because she's only interested in finding a heroic person who can make her say, yeah, I want to get with him, and he's saying, all the heroes are gone. And then he says, that guy right there, that was a hero. And he's pointing at this ostrich statue, a statue of an ostrich that was a cyborg. And then he says, yeah, I guess you were too young to remember that. All the heroes are gone. And we get this big double spread page of all these heroes going in to fight this planet-sized demon guy. And it kind of reminds me of the scene in Crisis on Infinite Earths where all the heroes are converging on the Anti-Monitor. It looks very similar to that. And apparently this ostrich cyborg guy, he died fighting whatever that thing was. And then we just go away from that with no explanation at all. Seaguy says, yep, all the heroes are dead now. We don't have any more need of them anymore. And that's just a weird little thing that just happens, and then out of nowhere, we're moving on to the next thing. At one point, Seaguy is playing chess with Death, who looks like an Italian sailor who drives one of those gondolas in Italy. He looks like one of those guys. They're playing chess for Seaguy's life. At one point, they're talking to a mummy who lives in a pyramid on the moon. one. There's little stuff here where Grant Morrison just is fearless, unlike any other writer that I've ever seen. Most writers would say, putting a pyramid on the moon, no, that's really stupid, that's not going to work. Grant Morrison will say either A, that's not stupid, it will work, or it is stupid, but I'm going to make it work. And in this story, it totally works. I really love what he's doing here. This is really, really fun stuff, really fascinating. It's one of those things I almost feel like it didn't have to be a Vertigo story, but I think some of the themes might have gone over the heads of younger audiences, so I think maybe it was fine as a Vertigo story. Also, this was intended to be part of a trilogy of 3-issue minis. This is the only one that I've read. The second one has come out. The second one is called Slaves of Mickey I, which is, I guess, kind of an indictment on popular culture icons. If this one is a scathing indictment of the consumerism of products like Coca-Cola or something like that, then the next miniseries is a scathing indictment on Mickey Mouse and stuff like that. But I have not read Slaves of Mickey I because it has not been collected into a trade paperback. I have read this miniseries, I have not read its sequel, and as far as I know, there hasn't been a third one, although I know at one time Morrison said there was going to be a third one. Maybe he is still going to do it because it took him a really long time to get around to doing Slaves of Mickey I, or maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, if you like this and you don't mind going back issue hunting, there is a sequel to this miniseries. I haven't read it, so I don't know if I can recommend it or not. But if it's anything as good as this one, then I definitely recommend checking out Slaves of Mickey I also. So those are my thoughts on Seaguy by Morrison and Cameron Stewart. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.